Hey everybody, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about playing out. How do you actually play out, and how do you use that to create some really interesting modern licks, particularly over 2-5-1s? My name is Noah Kellman, and I am here to teach you everything that I know about modern jazz piano, and I have a lot of structured methods that I love to use, so I'm excited to talk to you today about playing out because it is an absolute blast. Really quick, if you're new to my channel, please consider clicking the subscribe button and clicking the bell to turn on notifications so you don't miss any more videos just like this one. And also, those licks that you actually just heard as some examples about what we're going to be talking about today are from a brand new package that I just put out. It's called 20 Sick Modern Jazz Piano Licks, and what it actually is 2 different volumes, each containing actually a total of 25 modern jazz piano licks that you can immediately work on and add into your playing. So if you want to dive into this stuff in depth and really add a modern sound into your improvisation, be sure to check those out at jazzpianoconcepts.com/store, and they are currently, if you act fast, on sale at an intro price. All right, without further ado, I'll stop trying to sell you on my licks, and instead I'm just going to teach you some of how this stuff works. So first of all, what is modernism and what is playing out? Well, one thing I've talked a lot about on my channel is this concept of getting from point A to point B. In jazz, that path is really up to us. A lot of that is improvised. So we usually know, the form of the song. We know what the chords are. So we know what point A is, we know what point B is, we know where we're starting and where we're trying to land. So one thing that I'm not a huge fan of is this idea of randomly going off and then suddenly just teleporting to point B as if everything you did made sense, right? And I think a lot of the time when we're trying to learn to play out as students of, trying to play more dissonantly and take a more interesting path to point B, we often just get random, right? We take our path and we go like this, and then we're like, oh man, I don't know how to get back there, so I'm just gonna end at point B and suddenly resolve as if it made sense. Well, to play out, you can pretty much get away with anything, in my opinion, as long as instead of just doing random things that create dissonance, you use that dissonance as a more interesting way of creating a different path that still brings us home sensibly to point B. So I like to come up with little formulas that I practice getting in my ear that actually help me play out. So these are going to be really, really cool, really, really useful. One of the most simple formulas would be something like this. Major, half step below. So let's say that we are just landing on an F major chord. So let's say we were at a 2-5-1 of G minor 7 to C7 to F major 7. And actually the exact voicings I did there would be G minor 9 to C13 to F major 9, right? So when we land on F, using the little formula we just talked about, what we could do is land improvisationally in our right hand on E major. So that creates a lot of dissonance. We are playing out. So what is playing out? Well, at its most simple form, essentially it's playing dissonantly instead of consonantly. Instead of playing the diatonic notes of the scale or chord you're working with, you're actually playing outside of that scale. You're playing from a different key center. One way of doing that is literally playing a scale that does not coincide with the chord, right? So here we're using our major, a half step below formula. But the question is, how do we have that sound good and sound intentional? Well, we have to make sure we stick the landing. We have to make sure that we resolve well. So let's try this out. Okay, so for me, that sounded a little bit random. It sounded like I was just playing an out scale, a scale that was dissonant. I didn't really stick any landing there. So that was an example of not doing it so well. What if we did it like this? So what we did here was this. We actually used what are called approach notes, notes that chromatically approach a chord tone, and we made that chord tone the 7, consonantly, of course, the diatonic 7 of F major. So we did the E major scale, and then landed really nicely on that 7, and that justified our outness, right? So we really took a different, unexpected path from point A to point B by actually delaying our landing on F major a little bit using an E major tonality over it. Now, of course, you could come up with other little dissonance formulas, right? You could do the minor scale a minor third above the major, right? right? So that's pretty out there, and you have to find a good way of resolving again, right? Getting from point A to B sensibly. So if we're playing a 2-5-1 in F major, of course, so maybe over the G minor, what we're actually going to do is we're going to do A flat minor. So we're doing actually the minor a half step above. Maybe over the C, we can actually do F sharp minor. And then when we get to F, we can do E minor and resolve. So what did we do there? We actually created a dissonance sequence here. So we started a half step above our 2 with A flat minor, then we went to F sharp minor, then we went to E minor and resolved. So if you look at our bass line, we actually kind of did a chord substitution here, or almost like a reharm. We, instead of starting at 2 minor, we went up here to A flat, went down in whole steps and resolved on F. So this is a really interesting way to suddenly go from point A in a super weird way back to point B. So here's what that would sound like over our 2-5-1. Or maybe we could do something like this. So we're getting some really weird sounding dissonances here, playing totally out, so to speak, and then that landing is justified because we resolve well, and also we actually used a sequence to get there. So our journey was not random, we just took a different path. Now another part of what makes a modern sound is instead of using small enclosed chromatic structures for our lines, we use more arpeggiation. So in bebop, which is a really core and critical part of jazz language, we do a lot of chromaticism. So pretty much everything I did was more or less in this little range here on the piano, right? Well, one very modernistic thing to do, or at least in my opinion, to my ears, right, is to actually open up your lines with more arpeggiation. So. There are different ways of working on this. One thing you can do is literally work on different arpeggios that you can do over each chord in a 2-5-1. Another thing you can do is actually work on doing an arpeggio, right? And then connecting that to a bebop line, which is something I actually talk about in How to Sound Like Oscar Peterson. The main difference, of course, being that the arpeggios in that video are a bit more consonant and a bit more based on chord tones than what I'm doing in this more modernistic video here. But yeah, we can take an arpeggio and then connect it into our line by then switching to more chromaticism. So when we combine that more arpeggiated approach to constructing lines with also the concept of playing out, we start to really develop a modern sound over these 2-5-1s. And voila, there you have it, a simple way of understanding how to actually play out on a basic fundamental level, right? Just to summarize, instead of taking our straight line from point A to point B, we're gonna zoom off on a different path, add some dissonance, maybe use some chordal sequences that we substitute over the original chords, and use them as a way to get back to point B and resolve. We're also gonna throw in arpeggiation and have our lines be longer and larger, spanning more of the keyboard, instead of having everything being very, very chromatic and in a more enclosed space. When you combine that together, you start to get really modernistic sounding lines. And of course, if you do want to take this stuff way more in depth and actually have a lot of vocabulary that demonstrates these concepts exactly so that you can actually integrate them directly into your playing, be sure to check out the 2 different volumes of 20 sick modern jazz piano licks that I just released today at jazzpianoconcepts.com/store. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. If you're new to the channel, please be sure to click subscribe and the little bell to turn on notifications so you don't miss any more videos just like this one. And if you got anything useful out of this video, please be sure to give the video a like by hitting the thumbs up. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.